Welcome back to ABC 24 this week. I'm Otis Sanford. I'm Richard Ransom along with Otis Sanford, Diedre Malone, and Susan Adler-Thorpe. Let's talk about what each of you thought was the biggest story of 2022. We're going to start with you, Diedre. What was your choice and why?
Oh, thanks, Richard. So the biggest story for 2022 for me was the trigger ban that went into effect after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, giving the power to states to overturn reproductive rights choice for women across this country. So here in Tennessee, that trigger ban went into effect this fall, and it doesn't give you any recourse if you're a female, a child who's been raped, been a part of incest for you, or if your health is in jeopardy by being pregnant, to have any recourse to have an abortion. And so women across this country in the state of Tennessee have been upset about this and took to the streets to protest. And I think a lot of women now understand the power of the vote if they didn't understand it before. And so what an assault on women's right to choose. And so that was the big story for me in 2022.
And interestingly enough, Diedre, you know, there was that Vanderbilt poll just a week or two ago that showed a majority of Tennesseans believe the majority of Tennesseans believe the law that's on the books now is stronger than what a majority want. A majority do want there to be exceptions in certain circumstances, and that's not the case. So there is some talk, even in Republican circles, that they may introduce some legislation this year to modify that law somewhat, so it's not so strict.
And Richard, I read in the Tennessee Outlook recently that Senators Rusty Crowe and Senator Farrell Hale are talking about advancing legislation in this upcoming session to look at what are those instances where abortion, a physician can give an abortion to a female if there is an emergency regarding their health.
Right, because right now doctors don't feel like they're legally protected to do that. So yeah. Otis, let's talk about your big story in 2022.
Yeah, well, my big story obviously was a political story. That's who I am. And so I chose, the Democratic Party's continued dominance in local elections. Democrats solidified their power here by sweeping all of the countywide elections in the August primary. The Republican Party locally knew this was going to happen. They didn't even put up a candidate for some of these races, including sheriff. And so they saw this coming. But one thing that it did do, it knocked the only Republican office holder in the county out of office, and I'm talking about Amy Wyrick. And it also knocked, although it was a nonpartisan race, it knocked Dan Michael out of juvenile court judge. So the dominance of the Democratic Party in Shelby County is only getting stronger, but that only isolates Shelby County, in my view, from the rest of the state because it's so dominated by the Republican Party. I'm just worried that there's going to be continued fracture and continued division between Shelby County and the rest of the state.
If Republicans want to start winning more countywide races, what do they need to do in your estimation?
Well, I mean, what they really need to do is have more outreach, but I don't think that's going to work. The problem here with the Republican Party, and I know Republicans will disagree with me on this, is that the image of the Republican Party is one of intolerance. Everybody is afraid of Donald Trump. They're afraid of these national Republicans who are really extreme, and that filters down to the local party. And so it's hard for any Republican, even well-meaning Republicans like a Brent Taylor, to get a lot of traction here because of the image of the national party.
Okay, very good. And Susan, what was your choice for the #1 story of 2022?
Well, my #1 story that you tried to once attribute to Diedre is gun violence. I can't think of a story that's hit us this year that was more powerful and had deeper legs into everyone's home than gun violence. Now, it is certainly a national issue because there are too many damn guns out there. But if you add those guns to irresponsible gun owners and criminals in waiting, you've got a miserable mess that we're in. I mean, we've got 10 and 11-year-old kids in our community who are being arrested for car theft and even to sometimes armed carjacking. So I just don't see how you get around the problem of gun violence in this community. You know, when we had the high-profile murders of Reverend Eason Williams, of community activist Yvonne Nelson, of the young teacher Eliza Fletcher, and when you had this 19-year-old Ezekiel Kelly running around one night shooting everyone, and we had to shooting people, we had to lock down the city. Those four high-profile matters with gun violence and murders brought the whole issue to everyone else. It brought it into everyone's home. It touched everyone's lives. It crystallized the problem we have with gun violence. How do we get over it? I don't know, but juveniles are taking the focus of gun violence. Truthfully, juveniles are the minority in gun violence. It's mostly an adult problem. Juveniles are when it comes to juvenile crime, juveniles truly are in the minority. But the problem in the juvenile community is when you have a 14-year-old who steals a car, too often, not always, but too often becomes a 16-year-old who commits a carjacking, who becomes a 20-year-old who shoots a gun. And somehow we as a community, and it does take a village, we have to come together and figure out how to break that pipeline.
Well,
and
the police chief will tell you.
I don't have the answer.
Yeah, the police chief will tell you the law that allows people to carry guns in their cars
Yeah.
is the single worst thing that could have passed in terms of how easy it is now for a juvenile or someone over 18 years of age to get into a car, steal a gun, and commit a crime with it. So she would certainly agree with you on that, Susan. I chose the miserable state of education, especially Memphis Shelby County schools, failing leadership, the scandal surrounding the superintendent, a lot of top lieutenants in the administration building are gone as well. There's the need for an audit now, an internal audit that a lot of people are nervous about what that's going to show. And of course, the failing scores of our students. When you have 80%, if not more, of kids who are not proficient at their grade level, I think we're seeing the ramifications of that in our gun violence problem, and other things too, and sure hope that there's some progress made in 2023 as we talked about. All right, when we come back here on the show, we're going to talk about what we predict will be the biggest story in this new year right after this.